She didn't hear them coming. Not at first. She was standing at her doorway, holding her anatomy textbook against her chest like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Because honestly, it was. The morning sun had barely touched the rooftops of Ajagunal when the ground started to hum. A low, expensive sound. The kind of sound that didn't belong on a road like this. A road where the biggest thing that ever passed through was Mama Chioma's wheelbarrow. Then she saw it. One car. Then another. Then another. Then she lost count. 30 Rolls Royce Phantoms. 30. Rolling slowly down her dirt road like a silver river that had decided to flow the wrong way. Men in black suits stepped out one by one, their shoes sinking slightly into the red earth, their faces unreadable. They didn't look angry. They didn't look kind either. They just looked at her house. At her cracked walls and her plastic sheet roof and her one window with no glass. At her. And standing right there in front of them all, right there between those 30 cars and Miriam's doorway, was a man in a sharp suit, watching her with eyes that gave nothing away. Miriam didn't move. Her neighbors were already outside. Old Baba Sohn had dropped his radio. The children had stopped playing. The debt collector who had been banging on doors since 6 in the morning was standing in the mud with his mouth open, not saying a single word for the first time in his life. Nobody understood what was happening. Nobody except Miriam. Because she knew something the whole street didn't. She knew who was sleeping on her floor. But to understand how 30 Rolls Royces ended up on the most broken road in the city, we have to go back to the night before. We have to go back to the rain. We have to go back to the moment Miriam Madhu broke the only rule she had ever given herself. Eyes down. Books open. Let the world pass. She had kept that rule for 6 years. Last night she threw it into the mud. Miriam had not eaten since yesterday afternoon. Not because she forgot. You don't forget hunger. Hunger doesn't let you. It sits in your belly like a cold stone and reminds you every 20 minutes. A low, quiet growl that she had learned to answer with water. 2 cups. Sometimes 3. Enough to trick the stomach into thinking something was coming. Nothing was coming. She was up by 5. Not because she set an alarm. Her phone had been off since Tuesday, the battery swollen from age, the screen cracked so badly that the left side just showed a long black bruise. She woke up because the roof leaked directly above her head, and the rain from the night before had been finding its way through the same hole for 3 weeks. She kept a bucket there. The bucket was full. She emptied it into the gutter outside, came back in, wiped her face, and sat down. That was morning. The candle from last night was still on the table, burned down to a small, waxy stump, barely 2 fingers high. She had stopped it deliberately before it finished. You never burn a candle to nothing. That last inch is for emergencies. She had 4 candle stumps lined up on the windowsill, each one saved from a previous night, each one waiting for the night the kerosene ran out completely. She picked up her pharmacology textbook. Page 311. Drug metabolism in the liver. She read the same paragraph 4 times before it finally stuck, mouthing the words quietly because reading out loud helped her remember, and there was no one here to laugh at her for it. That was her life. That was all of it. By 7, she was at the herb stall. Mama Ruka, who owned the provision store next door, watched Miriam arrange her bundles of dongoyaro leaves and ginger root with the same look she always gave her, something between pity and respect, like she couldn't decide which one the girl deserved more. Miriam, you eat this morning? Yes, Ma. She hadn't. A woman came by for fever leaves. A man bought ginger for his wife's nausea. A young boy, maybe 8, stood at the edge of the stall for a long time before Miriam looked at him properly and saw the way he was holding his left arm, stiff, slightly raised, like he was protecting it without knowing he was doing it. Come here, she said. His name was Tund. He had fallen off a fence 2 days ago, and his mother had wrapped it in cloth and told him it would be fine. Miriam pressed 2 fingers along his forearm slowly, watching his face. He winced at the midshaft. She didn't need an X-ray to know. That was a fracture. Not displaced, probably, he could still move his fingers, but a fracture. Tell your mama to take you to General Hospital today. Not tomorrow. Today. Tell her the bone is broken and if she waits, it will set wrong. He stared at her. Go, she said and turned back to her herbs. She didn't charge him anything. She never charged the children anything. This was not kindness exactly. It was closer to habit, the way you do something so many times it stops feeling like a choice. She tutored from 10 to 12. 3 children, same compound, a mother who paid her 800 naira a week. She taught them mathematics and basic English. The eldest, a girl named Kike, was genuinely sharp. The kind of sharp that made Mariam sit a little straighter when she spoke, the kind that reminded her of herself at that age, before the sharpness had been ground down into something more useful and less joyful. She had been a child who asked too many questions. Then she had been a teenager in a house with too little food and too many problems. Then she had been a student with a full scholarship and an empty stomach, sitting in lectures where other students compared notes on which restaurant near campus had the best jollof rice, and she was calculating whether she could stretch her last 200 naira to cover both her transport and a sachet of gala for the day. She learned quickly that the best way to survive a room where you don't belong is to become the most serious person in it. If you are studying, nobody asks you how you are. Nobody offers you something you can't afford to accept. Eyes down. Books open. She had said it to herself so many times it had become less of a rule and more of a spine. The thing holding her upright. She got home at 2:30. She had made 1,400 naira. She set aside 600 for kerosene and transport. She put 200 in the small envelope taped to the inside of her textbook, her emergency fund, which currently held 950 naira, and the word emergency was doing a lot of heavy lifting. The remaining 600, she used to buy a small bag of starch from the woman at the end of the road. She cooked it thin. More water than starch, the way you cook when you are not cooking for taste but for volume. Something to fill the space. She ate half. She covered the rest with a plate. That covered pot. That half bowl of watery starch sitting quietly on her table. That was not leftover food. That was tomorrow's meal. She didn't know it yet, but before this night was over, she was going to give it to a stranger. And that stranger was going to change everything. She was studying again by 8. The rain started by 9. Not soft rain. Not the kind that taps politely on a zinc roof and helps you sleep. This was the kind that fell, heavy, loud, and mean, like the sky had been holding something back all week and finally gave up. The bucket filled again in 20 minutes. She was on page 318, hepatic first pass effect, when she heard something outside that was not rain. It was a sound she recognized from her clinical training. A low moan. The kind that doesn't come from pain exactly, it comes from confusion. From a body that has lost its place in the world and doesn't know how to ask for help. She put down her textbook. She went to the door. She opened it, and there, lying at the edge of the road not 20 steps from her house, half covered in mud, one arm stretched out like he was reaching for something he couldn't name, was an old man. Gray at the temples. A Rolex on his left wrist catching the faint light from her doorway. A suit that had cost more than her rent for the next 3 years, now soaked through and ruined. His eyes were open. But he wasn't seeing anything. Mariam stood there for 3 seconds. Every rule she had said, close the door. She stepped out into the rain. The rain hit her like a wall. In 3 steps she was soaked, her blouse plastered to her back, her slippers swallowed by the mud, the cold settling into her shoulders like it had been waiting all evening for permission. She didn't run. She walked fast and purposeful, the way she moved through everything, because running meant panic and panic didn't help anyone. She crouched beside him. Up close, he was older than she first thought. Late 60s, maybe 70. The kind of face that had once been very handsome and still remembered it. Strong jaw, deep-set eyes, skin that even now, even soaked and confused, carried a certain dignity. His gray hair was matted to his forehead. There was mud on his cheek, a shallow scrape above his eyebrow that had bled a little and stopped. His suit jacket, charcoal, well-cut, the kind you only see on men who don't check price tags, was torn at the left shoulder. She looked at the Rolex first. She would not pretend she didn't. Rose gold. Oyster perpetual. She had seen one once in a magazine a senior student left in the library. The article said it cost more than 4 million naira. She stared at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then she looked at his eyes. That was what made her stay. His eyes were open, moving slowly, tracking nothing. Not pain. Not fear. Like someone had reached into him and turned off a light that was supposed to stay on. She had seen that look once before, during her first clinical rotation, on a woman who had come in after a seizure. The body present. The person somewhere else entirely. Sir. She kept her voice even. Can you hear me? His lips moved. Nothing came out. She pressed 2 fingers to the side of his neck. His pulse was there, slow, a little irregular, but there. She lifted one of his eyelids gently with her thumb. His pupil was dilated but reactive, contracting slightly when she angled his face toward the faint light from her doorway. Not equal, the right was slightly larger than the left. She filed that away. She pulled his hand toward her and pressed her thumb into his nail bed hard. He pulled back, motor response intact. Sir, what is your name? He looked at her. Really looked for the first time. His mouth opened. He stopped. Tried again. There was somewhere I was going. Okay, she said. That's okay. It wasn't okay. A man in a 4 million naira watch lying in the mud in Ajigunal at 9 in the evening with no car, no phone visible, no one with him, nothing about this was okay. But she kept her face neutral because frightened patients don't give you accurate information, and she needed information. Can you sit up for me? She helped him. He was heavier than he looked, solid through the shoulders, the kind of build that said this man had not always been old. She got him upright and he sat there in the mud, blinking slowly, and she noticed his shoes. Leather. Genuine leather, not the synthetic kind. She could tell from the way they had absorbed the water. Berluti, the small metal plate on the heel said. She didn't know the brand, but she understood what it meant. She understood all of it actually. The suit, the watch, the shoes, the complete absence of anyone looking for him. Something had gone very wrong tonight before she found him. She made a decision. Not a comfortable decision. Not the kind you make and feel good about. The kind you make because every other option feels worse. She could not carry him to the police station. It was 40 minutes on foot and he couldn't walk without support. She had no money for a kiki, she had no working phone to call anyone, and leaving him here alone on this road was not something she was willing to do, and she didn't fully understand why, only that she wasn't. I'm going to take you inside, she told him. Just for tonight. Until you remember where you're going. He nodded. Slow, uncertain. Like a child being led somewhere unfamiliar, trusting not because he had reason to but because he had no other option. She put his arm over her shoulder. He smelled like expensive cologne, something woody and deep that had no business being in this rain, on this road, mixing with the smell of red mud and gutter water. It made the whole situation stranger. She focused on the ground. One step. Her slippers kept slipping. She planted each foot deliberately. Getting him through the door took 4 minutes and felt like 20. She sat him on her plastic chair, the good one, the one with all 4 legs intact, and went to get her kerosene lamp. She lit it, turned the wick up enough to see by, and knelt in front of him again. Now she could look properly. The scrape above his eyebrow was superficial. She cleaned it with the small bottle of methylated spirit she kept in her school bag, the same one she used for her herb preparation, dabbing carefully with a piece of cloth she tore from an old blouse. He winced but didn't pull away. Does your head hurt? Yes. First clear answer he had given. Where? He touched the back of his skull. Not the area he'd scraped. The back. She noted that too. Did you fall or did something hit you? He thought about it. His face changed when he was thinking. A slight tension between the brows, a tightening of the jaw, like someone trying to remember a word in a language they once spoke fluently. I'm not sure. I was walking. And then the road started to. He paused. It moved. Vertigo preceding the fall. Possible sudden onset. That pattern, the unequal pupils, the confusion, the preserved motor response, the headache at the occiput, she ran through her differential quietly in her head. Transient ischemic attack. Hypoglycemia. A dissociative fugue triggered by neurological stress. She couldn't rule anything out without equipment she didn't have. What she could do was the basics. When did you last eat? He didn't answer. Which was its own answer. She stood up and went to the pot on her table. The starch was still warm. She had covered it carefully before she sat down to study, the way you cover something you plan to return to. She looked at it for a moment. One bowl left, tomorrow's meal, 600 naira she couldn't get back until Thursday. She reached for the bowl. She didn't let herself think about it too long. Thinking too long was how you talked yourself into being the kind of person you didn't want to be. She filled it. She brought it to him. He looked at it. Then he looked at her. Something passed across his face, not recognition, but something close to it. Something that looked almost like grief. "This is yours," he said. "You need it more than I do tonight," she said. "Eat." He ate. Slowly at first, then less slowly. She watched him the way she watched all her patients. Not staring, just present. Tracking. His grip on the spoon steadied after a few minutes. Color came back into his face. Small signs. Good signs. When he finished, he held the empty bowl in both hands like he wasn't sure what to do with it. "I had a daughter," he said, to no one in particular. "She used to. She was always feeding people. Even when we had nothing." He stopped. Looked at the bowl. "We had nothing for a long time." Miriam didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Outside, the rain was beginning to ease. The bucket was full again. The candle stump on the windowsill threw a thin, tired light across the room, across his ruined suit and her borrowed textbook, and the two of them sitting in her broken house like neither of them had anywhere else in the world to be. She pulled her anatomy textbook onto her lap and opened it. Not to read. Just to have something to do with her hands. He fell asleep in the chair 20 minutes later. She didn't sleep at all. If you're still here watching this, you need to hear something. Most people would have closed that door. Most people would have told themselves it wasn't their problem. Miriam had every reason to do exactly that. She had nothing. And she gave it anyway. If this story is doing something to your chest right now, don't ignore that feeling. Share this with someone who needs to remember that kindness doesn't need permission to exist. And stay with us, because what arrives at sunrise will change everything you think you know about this girl. She checked him every 45 minutes. Not because anyone told her to, because that was what you did with a patient presenting with acute confusional onset and unequal pupils. You monitored. You didn't sleep. You watched the small things because with neurological cases, it's always the small things that tell you what's coming before it arrives. At 11, she checked his pupils again. Still slightly unequal but both reactive. She pressed her knuckle gently against his sternum. He stirred, muttered, settled. Appropriate response to painful stimulus. At 12:30, she checked his breathing. Steady. Not too slow. At 1 in the morning, she tilted his chin slightly and checked the scrape above his eyebrow. Clean, no swelling spreading beneath it. She pulled the thin wrapper she owned, the good one, the blue one her mother had sent 2 years ago, and draped it over his shoulders without thinking about it. She stood there for a second after she did it. Looked at her hands like they had done something without asking her first. Then she sat back down on the floor. The kerosene lamp was on its last. She could tell from the way the flame was shrinking, not going out, just getting quieter, pulling inward, conserving. She turned the wick down to almost nothing. Enough light to see by if she leaned close. She opened her pharmacology textbook to page 322 and read by that thin, dying glow until the words started doubling on the page. She was not going to think about the fact that she was cold, or that the floor was hard, or that she had given a stranger her wrapper and her last meal and her entire night's sleep, and she had an anatomy practical examination in 11 days that she could not afford to fail. She was not going to think about any of that. He woke up at 2:17. She knew the time because the church 3 streets over had a bell that rang on the hour and the half, and she had been counting them like a nurse counts a patient's breaths, automatically, without deciding to. He didn't wake up startled. He came back slowly, the way someone surfaces from deep water, first the eyes opening, then the slow registration of ceiling, walls, lamplight, stranger sitting on the floor across from him with a textbook in her lap. He looked at her for a long time. "You're still here," he said. "It's my house," she said. Something about that made him almost smile. Not quite, but almost. His voice was clearer now, the thickness was gone, the words no longer arriving loose and disconnected. She noted this. Cognitive function improving with rest and glucose. The starch had done something. Sometimes the simplest interventions were the ones that worked. "How is your head?" she asked. "Still there." He touched the back of it carefully. Thus loud. "The dizziness?" "Better." He looked around the room slowly. At the bucket in the corner, still half full from the leak. At the 4 candle stumps on the windowsill. At her textbooks stacked against the wall in a tower that leaned slightly to the left. "What is your name?" "Miriam." "Miriam." He said it like he was making sure he would keep it. "I am Clement." "Okay, Clement. Do you know what day it is?" He thought. Thursday. It was Wednesday. But he was close. Close enough to be reassuring. "Do you know where you were going tonight?" "Before the road." The almost smile left his face. He looked down at his hands, at the Rolex on his wrist, still ticking, indifferent to everything that had happened, and he turned it once, slowly, the way people handle objects they are no longer sure belong to them. "I was looking for something," he said. "I can't remember what." She made tea. She had 6 Lipton tea bags left, kept in a small Ziploc bag inside her second textbook because the rats in this compound would find anything that smelled like food. She boiled water on her small kerosene stove, using the last of the kerosene, which she had promised herself she wouldn't touch until Thursday, and made 2 cups. She gave him the one without the crack in the rim. He wrapped both hands around it. The steam rose between them. For a while neither of them said anything, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when 2 people are both too tired to perform. Then he said, "I had a daughter." She looked up. "Had?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "She left. Or I think I drove her away. I can't always tell the difference anymore." He took a slow sip of the tea. "She used to make tea like this. Not this kind, fancier. With ginger and something else. But she always made 2 cups. Boys. Even when she was angry with me, she always made 2 cups." Miriam didn't say anything. "She wanted to be a doctor," he continued. I told her the world didn't need more doctors. That she should come into the business. That medicine was for people who didn't have other options." He laughed, but it was a short, hollow sound. "I said that to her. My own daughter." He shook his head. "I don't know why I'm telling you this." "Because it's 2 in the morning and you have no one else to tell," Miriam said. He looked at her. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's exactly it." She thought about her mother then. She didn't mean to. Her mother, who had sold her own gold earrings, the small ones, the ones her grandmother had left her, to pay for Miriam's first year of school fees. Who had called her every Sunday until the phone calls stopped because Miriam's phone stopped working and she hadn't had the money to fix it in 3 months. She wondered if her mother was also awake somewhere right now, talking to the dark about a daughter who had gone quiet. She pushed the thought down. She was good at that. "What kind of doctor do you want to be?" Clement asked. "Neurologist," she said, without hesitating. He raised his eyebrows slightly. "Why?" "Because the brain is the only organ that can lie to you," she said. "Everything else, the heart, the lungs, the liver, they fail in ways you can measure. But the brain can convince you that you're fine when you're not. That you remember things you've forgotten. That you're going somewhere when you're lost." She paused. "I want to understand the thing that deceives us." Clement looked at her for a long time after that. "How old are you?" he asked. 21. He nodded slowly. Like that answered a different question from the one he asked. By 3, his eyes were closing again. She took the cup from his hands before it could fall, rinsed it with water from the bucket, and set it upside down on the table. She sat back down on the floor. Her back was aching. The cold had settled into her hips properly now, the kind of cold that doesn't go away just because you ignore it. She pulled her knees to her chest and rested her chin on them and looked at this old man asleep in her plastic chair, wrapped in her mother's wrapper, breathing slowly and steadily, his 4 million naira Rolex ticking in the quiet. She had no idea who he really was. She had no idea that 8 hours from now, her road would be unrecognizable. All she knew was that his pupils were equal now. Both of them. Reactive and equal. She had checked again at 2:50 and they were equal. That was the only thing that mattered tonight. She closed her eyes. If you're watching this and you've been keeping quiet about something, a person you walked past, a hand you didn't hold, a call you kept meaning to make, this story is for you. Not to judge you. Just to remind you. We are all Miriam in some version of our lives, sitting on a cold floor wondering if we made the right choice. She did. She always was going to. Some people are just built that way. Stay with us, because what comes through that door at sunrise is going to break your heart before it puts it back together. She woke up to the ground shaking. Not an earthquake. She had lived in this compound long enough to know every sound this road made. The 6 a.m. bread seller with his squeaky cart, the Danfo buses that took the corner too fast, the generator from the church that coughed to life every morning like an old man with a bad chest. This was none of those things. This was something heavier. A vibration that came up through the concrete floor and into her hip bones before she even opened her eyes. She sat up. Clement was still in the chair, awake, looking at the door with the focused, careful expression of someone whose memory is starting to return but hasn't fully arrived yet, like a word stuck at the tip of a tongue. He was sitting straighter than he had been last night. Color back in his face. He had folded her wrapper neatly across the arm of the chair. "Something is coming," he said. She was already at the window. The first car she saw was a silver Rolls Royce Phantom, moving slowly down the dirt road like it was deciding whether the road deserved it. Then another. Then another behind that. All of them that particular kind of slow that only vehicles driven by people with power ever move, unhurried, because the world will wait. They kept coming. Miriam stood at that window and counted. She stopped at 15 and the cars were still coming. People were emerging from their houses. Baba Son with his radio still in his hand, Mama Ruka in her house wrapper, 3 children from the compound next door standing barefoot in the red mud, just staring. The debt collector, Femi, the one who had knocked on 4 doors on this street yesterday demanding money and calling names, was standing completely still at the edge of the road. Mouth closed. For once in his life, mouth completely closed. 30 cars. 30 Rolls Royces on a road that had never seen one. Then the lead car stopped directly in front of her house. He stepped out before the driver could open the door for him. That told her everything she needed to know about him. He was younger than Clement by maybe 25 years. Broad, the kind of broad that came from a gym and not from work. He had on a charcoal suit, not Tom Ford, but close, and his shoes were clean despite the mud, which meant he had looked down at this road before he stepped out of that car and decided his shoes were more important than moving quickly. His face was the kind of handsome that knew about itself. He scanned the street once, efficiently, the way people scan rooms when they are looking for exits or for things they can use. His eyes landed on Miriam's door. She opened it before he could knock. They looked at each other. She was in yesterday's clothes, her hair had lost whatever shape it had yesterday morning, there was a bruise forming on her left hip from the floor, and she had not slept more than 90 minutes. She was also not moving from the doorway. "Where is he?" the man said. Not a question. The kind of sentence that expected the world to simply comply. "Who are you?" Miriam said. The pause. He was not used to that question at this stage of an entrance. "My name is Rotamai Stephen. Clement Stephen is my uncle. We have been looking for him since last night. Stand aside." "You can wait outside," Miriam said. "I'll tell him you're here." Rotamai's jaw shifted slightly. He looked at her, really looked at her, the way people look when they are trying to calculate whether someone is worth the energy of a confrontation or whether they can simply be moved. He must have decided something because he took one step forward. "Young lady, you are standing between me and my uncle, in what I can see is an illegal structure in an unregistered." She said, "Wait." Clement's voice came from behind her. Quiet, but with a quality to it that made Rotamai stop the way you stop when a sound doesn't match the room it comes from. Miriam turned. Clement was standing. Upright, steady, his ruined suit jacket held in one hand, the Rolex catching the morning light through the window. He looked exhausted and rumpled and entirely, completely himself. She could see it happening as she watched him, the pieces settling back into place behind his eyes like a man finding his footing on uneven ground. He knew who he was. He stepped forward until he was beside Miriam in the doorway. Uncle. I heard you, Rodomai. Clement looked at his nephew without warmth. I also heard the part where you called this house an illegal structure. To the woman who kept me alive last night. Rodomai's face rearranged itself instantly, concern rushing in to replace the authority, the practiced grief of a man who has rehearsed it. We were so worried. We've had the police out, the hospitals, Dr. Osei is in the second car. We brought him to assess you. There are concerns about your cognitive. There are concerns, Clement said flatly, about my estate. Let us not dress it differently. The silence that followed that sentence landed on the street like a dropped stone. Miriam watched Rodomai's face very carefully. He smiled. The kind of smile that came from the front of the face and stopped there. You're clearly disoriented still, which is exactly what Dr. Osei is here to. I can tell you what day it is, Clement said. I can tell you the name of every account in my portfolio and the clause in my father's will that you have been trying to find a way around for 6 years. Do you want me to do that here? On this road? With all of these people standing outside? Rodomai said nothing. I didn't think so. Clement turned to Miriam then. Can I sit down? Yes, she said, and stepped back to let him in. What followed was 40 minutes of the strangest thing Miriam had ever watched. Dr. Osei came in, a slight man with glasses and a leather bag that probably cost more than her monthly herb income, and conducted a proper cognitive assessment right there at her plastic table. He asked Clement the date, the year, the name of the current head of state, to count backwards from 100 by sevens, to repeat a sequence of 5 words after a delay. Clement answered everything. Not slowly, not with effort. He answered the way people answer questions they find slightly beneath them. She watched Dr. Osei's face as he wrote his notes. His pen slowed down twice. She knew what that meant. The results were not giving Rodomai what Rodomai needed. Outside, she could hear the street. The murmur of her neighbors, growing. Someone had called someone who had called someone else. That was how this neighborhood worked. News traveled faster than vehicles. She could hear Femi the debt collector's voice now, raised, explaining something to someone with the enthusiasm of a man narrating a story he intends to tell for the rest of his life. Rodomai stood in the corner of her small house with his hands in his pockets, looking at the 4 candle stumps on the windowsill, looking at the bucket in the corner, looking at everything with the expression of a man who had walked into a situation he could not purchase his way out of. Then Dr. Osei cleared his throat. Mr. Stephen is cognitively intact, he said to the room, to no one and everyone. I am noting possible acute thiamine deficiency as a contributing factor to last night's episode, likely exacerbated by dehydration. He will need imaging and a full panel, but there is no basis, medical or otherwise, for any competency proceeding at this time. Rodomai didn't move. Clement looked at Miriam. Thiamine, he said. That's vitamin B1. Yes, she said. It's one of the first things that depletes under chronic stress. When it drops low enough, it affects the brain's ability to process information correctly, orientation, memory, coordination. It's very treatable. He held her gaze. You knew that last night. I suspected it, she said. I didn't have the equipment to confirm it. He nodded. Slow, deliberate. The nod of a man filing something away permanently. Outside, 30 Rolls Royces sat in the morning sun on a road that would never be the same again. And inside Miriam's house, on her broken floor, at her plastic table, under her leaking roof, a man who had forgotten he owned the world was remembering not just who he was, but what he owed. Not in money. In something that lasts longer. Don't go anywhere. What Clement does next, what he says to Miriam before he walks out that door, is the part of this story that will stay with you. Not for a day. For a long time. Stay with us. Rodomai left first. No goodbye. No apology. He walked out of Miriam's door, got into the lead Rolls Royce, and the window went up before the driver had even closed his door properly. She watched the car pull away and thought, this man will spend the rest of his life being exactly who he showed himself to be this morning, and no amount of money will fix that. Some people are poor in ways that have nothing to do with their account balance. Clement watched his nephew leave from the doorway. His face was unreadable. Not angry, something quieter than anger. The kind of feeling you carry when you have known something about a person for a long time and have simply been waiting for them to show you they haven't changed. He turned back to Miriam. "Walk with me," he said. She almost said no. She had things to do. She needed kerosene. She needed to check on Tun's arm. She had 17 pages of pharmacology to cover before Thursday. All of that was true. And none of it moved from her mouth, because something about the way he said it wasn't a request exactly. It was the way someone speaks when they have something to give and are trying to find the right distance to give it from. She found her second slipper, it had gone under the table, and walked out with him. The street was still crowded. 20-something Rolls Royces still lined the road, their drivers standing in small quiet clusters, and every person in the compound and the 3 compounds adjoining had found a reason to be outside. Mama Ruka was pretending to sweep. The children had stopped pretending anything. They were just standing there openly, staring, the way children do before anyone teaches them that staring is rude. Femi the debt collector was still there. He had not left. He was standing at the edge of it all with his hands in his pockets, trying to look like a man who belonged in a scene he absolutely did not belong in. When Clement stepped out and the remaining drivers stood a little straighter, when the whole street shifted its attention, Femi's eyes found Miriam's face. She looked back at him, not triumphantly, not even particularly. Just looked. Then she looked away. That was enough. Clement walked slowly, and she matched his pace. He stopped at the edge of the road and looked up and down the street the way someone looks at a place they are seeing properly for the first time, not the road itself, but what the road meant. The cracked walls. The open gutters. The zinc rooftops with their rust blooming at the edges. The children in school uniforms that had been washed so many times the colors had apologized and left. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. 6 years. "And before that?" "Wari," she said. "My mother's house. Smaller than mine." He nodded. He was quiet for a moment, turning his Rolex once around his wrist. She had noticed he did this when he was organizing his thoughts. "Dr. Osei wants me at Eco Atlantic Hospital this afternoon. Full scan, blood panel, the whole performance." The pause. "He agrees with your assessment, by the way. Thiamine deficiency compounded by dehydration and what he called acute stress load. He said whoever stabilized me last night knew what they were doing." "I only did the basics," Miriam said. "The basics kept me here," Clement said. She didn't answer that. It felt too large to respond to on a normal street at 7 in the morning. He stopped walking. He turned to face her properly, and she saw in his eyes what she had been watching return all morning, the full presence of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he was worth and had stopped needing anyone to confirm it for him. "I want to do something," he said. "And I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say no. Because you look like someone who says no quickly." Despite herself, she almost smiled. "I'm listening." "I've had a parcel of land on this street for 11 years, he said. "Bought it when this neighborhood was supposed to be part of a development that never happened. It's been sitting. Documented, cleared, just sitting." He looked down the road, past the cars, toward a gap between 2 buildings that Miriam had always assumed was just a forgotten space. "I want to build on it." She waited. "A medical clinic," he said. "Properly equipped. Not a room with a bench and a BP machine. A real facility, ultrasound, a small theater, a pharmacy, a pediatric ward. Something that serves this area and charges what people here can actually pay." He looked at her. "And I want you to run it. Not when you're done with school. Now, as a training ground. Your internship, your residency, your research, all of it based here. With staff. With equipment. With a salary that means you can fill your kerosene lamp to the top." Miriam stared at him. "That last part was not a joke," he said. "I heard," she said. Her voice was even, but something behind her sternum was doing something she couldn't immediately name. Not excitement exactly. Something more complicated. "Why?" "Because I told you last night about my daughter," he said. "You didn't ask about her again. You didn't use it. You just listened and then you made tea." He paused. "My daughter's name is Simi. She graduated from medical school in London 4 years ago. We haven't spoken in 3. He said it without flinching, The way you say a thing you have made peace with being ashamed of. I told her medicine was for people without options. That is the sentence I have to carry. I can't unsay it to her yet, she's not ready to hear from me. But I can say something different here. To you. Miriam looked at the gap between the buildings. 11 years of empty land, one street over from where she had been surviving on half-filled kerosene lamps and 2 cups of water for breakfast. I have an anatomy practical in 11 days, she said. I know, he said. You'll take it. The build takes 6 months minimum. You'll be done with your finals before we open the doors. She looked at him. You already planned this. I planned something, he said. I didn't know what it would look like until this morning. He reached into his inside jacket pocket, the ruined charcoal suit, still damp at the collar, and produced a card. Plain white. Just a name, a number, a small embossed logo she didn't recognize yet. Call that number this week. My legal team will handle the documentation. Your name goes on the building, Miriam. Not mine. Yours. She took the card. She looked at it for a long time. The card was thick, the kind of thick that meant it was custom made, the kind of paper that cost money just to exist. She ran her thumb across the embossed letters. She thought about her mother's gold earrings. Sold for school fees that had bought her 6 years of borrowed textbooks and a scholarship that covered tuition but not food, not rent, not the small daily cost of surviving a life that didn't come with a net. She thought about Tund and his broken arm and his mother wrapping it in cloth because General Hospital meant transport money they didn't have. She thought about the 3 children she tutored every morning and Kike's particular sharpness, and how that kind of sharpness needed somewhere to go or it would spend the rest of its life tutoring other people's children in a compound that was slowly falling apart. She thought about page 322 of her pharmacology textbook. Hepatic first pass effect. Read by a dying candle at 1 in the morning on a cold concrete floor. Madhu Medical Center, Clement said quietly. If you'll allow it. She looked up. You'll need to call your daughter, she said. Whatever happened, you'll need to call her. He was quiet for a moment. Something moved across his face. I know. Not because of this, she said. Just because she should know her father is all right. He nodded. So. The nod of a man who needed to hear that from someone who didn't want anything from him. She put the card in her pocket. Around them, the street was alive. People talking, the car engines running low, children finally brave enough to come closer and touch the bonnets of the Rolls Royces with careful fingers. Mama Ruka no longer pretending to sweep, just watching with her hand over her mouth. The morning sun was full now, burning the last of the night's damp from the red earth. Miriam looked at her house. At the plastic sheeting over the roof. At the bucket she had left just inside the door. She had given everything she had to a stranger on a road. And the stranger had given her back something she hadn't known she was missing. Not money, not a building with her name on it. The belief that her hands, these ink-stained, herb green, cold floor hands, were not just built for surviving. They were built for this. Some things can only find you when you stop protecting yourself from them. If this story moved you, if some part of it felt familiar, if you saw yourself in Miriam's cold floor or Clement's silence, or even in the daughter who stopped answering the phone, please share this. Not for us. For the person in your life who needs to hear that what they're carrying is not permanent. That the road changes. That sometimes the night that breaks everything is the same night that builds something new. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know.